The call came on a Tuesday, right as I was finishing another failed attempt at a self-portrait. My hands were covered in charcoal, and dark smudges decorated my workspace like accusations of mediocrity. Brian's voice echoed in my head. "Why do you even bother, Layla? You'll never be good enough. I'm Layla, and for 30 years, I've lived in the shadow of my perfect older brother." The phone kept ringing, and I almost let it go to voicemail. Another habit born from years of expecting disappointment. But something made me answer. "Ms. Wheeler, this is James Morton from Morton & Associates law firm. I'm calling regarding your Uncle Robert's estate." My Uncle Robert? I hadn't seen him in years, though he'd always been the only one who believed in my art. The last time we spoke, he'd bought one of my paintings for what I later learned was 10 times its asking price. "I'm afraid I don't understand," I said, wiping charcoal on my jeans. "Uncle Robert passed away 3 months ago." "Yes, and after extensive review, his will has finally cleared probate. Ms. Wheeler, you've been named the sole heir to Armstrong Arts International." The charcoal pencil slipped from my fingers. That's impossible. Uncle Robert owned one of the largest art dealership networks in the country. Indeed, the company currently manages 16 galleries across 3 continents, with numerous subsidiary businesses. Would you be available to meet tomorrow morning to discuss the details? I sat down hard in my paint-splattered chair. Yes, I suppose I would. The next morning, I walked into Morton & Associates wearing the only business suit I owned, a black ensemble I'd bought for Uncle Robert's funeral. The receptionist directed me to a conference room where I met James Morton and another man who introduced himself as Emerson Armstrong, the company's chief advisor. "Your uncle spoke often about you," Emerson said, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "He believed in your vision for art as something that should be accessible to everyone, not just the elite." James cleared his throat and began laying out documents. "There are several matters we need to discuss, but first—" A knock interrupted him. His secretary entered with a stack of folders, and as she set them down, a familiar name caught my eye on one of the papers. "Wait," I said, reaching for the document. "Is that Brian Wheeler?" Emerson and James exchanged glances. "Yes," Emerson confirmed. "Your brother has been employed at one of our subsidiary companies for the past 18 months. My stomach churned. Brian, who'd spent years mocking my artistic aspirations, worked for an art company? The same company I now owned? Does he know about this? About the inheritance? "Not yet," James replied. "The reading of the will was private, as per your uncle's instructions." I thought about Sunday dinner just 2 days ago, where Brian had dominated the conversation with stories about his corporate successes. "When are you going to grow up and get a real job, Layla?" he'd asked, smirking over his wineglass. "You can't play with crayons forever." "Ms. Wheeler?" Emerson's voice pulled me back. "There's something else you should know. We've noticed some concerning patterns in the financial reports from your brother's division." My throat tightened. "What kind of patterns?" "Irregularities," he said carefully. "Nothing concrete yet, but—" "Show me everything," I interrupted, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. For the next 2 hours, they walked me through the basics of the company structure, my new responsibilities, and the preliminary findings regarding the financial discrepancies. By the time I left the office, my head was spinning with information, but one thought remained crystal clear. Brian had no idea his little sister now held his career in her hands. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Zara. "Drinks, you sound weird." I met her at our usual spot, a quiet bar with abstract art on the walls. After I told her everything, she leaned back with a low whistle. "Holy shit, Lay. What are you gonna do?" I traced the condensation on my glass, thinking about years of snide comments and undermining remarks. About being the family disappointment. About Brian's smug face every time he achieved something I couldn't. "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but for the first time in my life, I have real power. And I took a deep breath. I think it's time to use it." Zara reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Whatever you decide, I'm here for you. But Lay, don't let him make you small anymore." My phone buzzed again, a message from Emerson with a preliminary audit report attached. The first line made my blood run cold. Unauthorized transfers totaling $2.1 million. I looked up at Zara, my heart pounding. I think my brother's been stealing from the company. My company. The weight of those words settled over me like a heavy cloak. For years, I'd tried to earn my family's approval through my art. Now, with a twist of fate I never saw coming, I had the power to expose the golden child for what he really was. The question was, did I have the courage to use it? The Armstrong Arts International headquarters felt like entering another world. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic city views, and original artwork adorned every wall. My footsteps echoed across marble floors as I followed Emerson to his office. "Coffee?" he offered, gesturing to a sleek machine. "Please, I haven't slept much since yesterday." He handed me a steaming cup and pulled up financial records on his dual monitors. "These are the transactions we flagged. Notice anything unusual?" I leaned forward, scanning the numbers. Despite my limited business experience, even I could spot the pattern. Regular transfers always just under the reporting threshold, flowing through a maze of subsidiary accounts. "Who authorized these?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Your brother has signing authority up to $250,000. Each individual transfer stays under that limit, but collectively..." Emerson's voice trailed off. My phone buzzed, a text from Brian. "Heard you were at AAI? What's little sis doing in the big leagues?" I ignored it, focusing on the screen. "Show me everything from the past year." Hours passed as Emerson and his team walked me through the company's structure. By lunch, my head throbbed with information overload. But one thing was clear. Brian had been systematically siphoning money through a complex web of transactions. A knock at the door interrupted our discussion. "Ms. Wheeler?" A young woman entered, carrying a tablet. "I'm Zara Steele, your new assistant. Mr. Armstrong hired me this morning." I smiled, recognizing my best friend in her professional disguise. We'd discussed this plan last night, having someone I could trust on the inside. "Perfect timing," Emerson said. "We were just about to visit the subsidiary office where Brian works." My stomach clenched. "Today?" "No time like the present. Don't worry, it's just a routine new owner tour. Brian won't suspect anything." The drive to the subsidiary office gave me time to compose myself. Zara squeezed my hand reassuringly as we pulled into the parking lot. "Remember," she whispered, "you're the boss now." The office lobby buzzed with activity. Employees straightened their postures as we walked past, word of the new owner's visit spreading like wildfire. Then I heard his voice. Well, if it isn't my baby sister." Brian strode toward us, all confidence and expensive suit. He hugged me too tight, his cologne overwhelming. "What brings you to our humble workplace?" "Just touring my new company," I said, watching his face carefully. He laughed, but something flickered in his eyes. "Your company? That's cute." "Ms. Wheeler is indeed the new owner of Armstrong Arts International," Emerson stated firmly, "including all subsidiaries." Brian's smile froze. "Is that so? Uncle Robert always did have an interesting sense of humor." "We'd love a tour of the financial department," I said, matching his fake smile, "since you're so familiar with the operations here." His laugh turned sharp. "Sorry, sis, but I have meetings all afternoon. Perhaps another time?" "Cancel them," I said quietly. "This takes priority." The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken tensions. Finally, Brian's facade cracked slightly. "Of course. Right this way." As we followed him through the office, I noticed how he skipped certain areas, steering us away from specific departments. Zara took careful notes on her tablet, while Emerson asked pointed questions about financial protocols. "And these international wire transfers," Emerson pressed, "they all go through proper channels?" "Absolutely," Brian replied smoothly. "Everything by the book." My phone vibrated. A message from Zara. "Security just caught someone shredding documents in the accounting department." "Brian?" I interrupted his rehearsed speech about compliance procedures. "Why don't we check out the accounting department next?" He stepped in front of me. "It's rather boring, really. Nothing you'd understand." "Try me." "Listen, Layla." He lowered his voice, gripping my arm. "You might own this company on paper, but you don't know the first thing about running it. Why don't you stick to your little paintings and let the professionals handle business?" I pulled my arm free. "Remove your hand, or I'll have security do it for you." The mask slipped completely then, revealing the contempt I'd always known was there. "You're making a mistake," he hissed. "No, Brian. I think I'm finally fixing one." I turned to Emerson. "Please have it freeze all accounts Mr. Wheeler has access to, effective immediately, and send a team to secure the accounting department." Brian's face went pale. You can't do that. Actually, I smiled. I can, and I just did. As security arrived to escort us to accounting, I caught a glimpse of Brian pulling out his phone, fingers flying over the keys. Whatever evidence he was trying to destroy, whatever accomplices he was trying to warn, it was too late. The house of cards was about to come down, and my perfect brother had no idea I held the winning hand. Zara's tablet pinged with an alert. She showed me the screen. Multiple attempts to access offshore accounts, all within the last 5 minutes. Game on, big brother. The cafe where I'd arranged to meet Alexis was quiet for a Saturday morning. I spotted her immediately. Brian's wife still had that perfect posture, designer handbag placed just so on the table. We hadn't really talked since she married my brother 5 years ago. Layla. She stood to hug me, her smile genuine but strained. It's been too long. Thanks for meeting me. I sat down, noting the dark circles under her makeup. How are you holding up? Her fingers tightened around her coffee cup. You mean since you froze all of Brian's work accounts? He's been difficult. I can imagine. I paused as the waiter brought my cappuccino. Remember when we were roommates in college? You used to tell me everything. That was before I married your brother. Alexis looked down. Things change. Do they have to? She met my eyes then, and I saw a flicker of the old Alexis, the one who'd stay up late with me, sharing secrets and dreams. Brian's been acting strange lately. Secretive. He's been making a lot of late-night phone calls in his office. When did it start? About a year ago. He started coming home later, more stressed. Sometimes he'd wake up in the middle of the night to check his laptop. She hesitated. Last month, I found him shredding documents at 3 a.m. My heart raced. Did you see what they were? No, but... Alexis reached into her bag, hands shaking slightly. I took pictures of some papers he left in his home office. I shouldn't have, but something felt wrong. She slid her phone across the table. The photos showed spreadsheets, account numbers, and what looked like offshore banking details. Why are you showing me this? I asked quietly. Tears welled in her eyes. Because the Alexis who was your best friend would have done it years ago. Because I've spent 5 years watching Brian tear you down while building himself up on lies. She took a shuddering breath. And because last week, I found divorce papers in his desk, already signed, dated 3 months ago. My hand found hers across the table. I'm so sorry. Don't be. I think I've known for a while that something wasn't right. But Layla, she squeezed my hand. Whatever you find, whatever you do, be careful. Brian's not just angry, he's scared. And he's been making calls to some people I don't trust. The cafe door chimed, and we both jumped as Zara walked in, right on schedule. Alexis, what a surprise. Zara's performance was perfect as she pulled up a chair. I didn't know you two were meeting today. Just catching up, I said, watching Alexis carefully. Zara's been helping me adjust to running Uncle Robert's company. Alexis's eyes widened slightly at the casual mention of my new role. It must be overwhelming. It would be, except for some excellent advisors. I nodded to Zara, who pulled out her tablet. Speaking of which, Zara said, we found something interesting in the international accounts. Transfers to a company called Artemis Holdings? Ring any bells? Alexis went pale. That's the company Brian told me to register last year, in my maiden name. Zara and I exchanged looks. Did he tell you why? He said it was for tax purposes, that lots of executives do it. She pressed her hands to her face. Oh God, what did I help him do? Nothing yet, Zara assured her. The company exists, but it's clean, no transactions. He wanted me to sign some transfer papers next week, Alexis whispered. Said it was urgent. My phone buzzed. A text from Brian. Where's my wife? She's not answering her phone. He's checking up on you, I said, showing her the message. Alexis straightened her shoulders, something hardening in her expression. Let me help. Whatever you need to know, whatever evidence you're looking for, I want to help find it. It could get ugly, I warned. Brian won't forgive either of us. There's nothing left to forgive. She pulled out a USB drive. Here's everything I could copy from his home computer. Financial records, emails, contact lists. She slid it across the table. Just promise me one thing. Name it. When you take him down, because we both know that's where this is heading, make it clean. Make it permanent. No second chances. My phone buzzed again. Found you. Nice catch-up session. We all turned to the cafe window. Brian stood outside, his face dark with rage as he watched us through the glass. Alexis flinched but didn't look away. Go out the back, I told her, standing up. Zara will take you somewhere safe. What about you? I grabbed my bag, making sure the USB drive was secure. I'm going to have a chat with my brother. It's time he learned that his little sister isn't so little anymore. As Zara hustled Alexis toward the back exit, I walked to the front door, my heart pounding but my steps steady. The game had changed now. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about every person Brian had ever used and discarded. Time to show him what real power looks like. Brian grabbed my arm the moment I stepped outside the cafe. What the hell do you think you're doing? I yanked free, keeping my voice steady. Having coffee with an old friend. Problem? Don't play dumb, Layla. I saw you with my wife. His face was flushed with anger. What lies have you been telling her? Interesting choice of words, considering the divorce papers you've been hiding. That caught him off guard. His eyes narrowed. Been snooping through my personal life now? Guess Uncle Robert's money bought you some courage. No, Brian, you did that all by yourself. I started walking toward my car. Years of belittling me, making me feel worthless. You taught me exactly what kind of person you really are. He followed, his expensive shoes clicking on the pavement. Oh, please. You're still the same pathetic little girl who can't handle real responsibility. You think you can run a multinational company? You can barely run your own life. I spun to face him. Is that why you've been embezzling millions? Because you're so much more responsible? Prove it. His smile was cold. You've got nothing. I pulled out my phone, showing him a screenshot Zara had sent earlier. Wire transfer to Artemis Holdings, authorized by you, scheduled for next week. Ring any bells? The color drained from his face. Where did you get that? I own the company, remember? Every transaction, every account, every dirty little secret, it all belongs to me now. I stepped closer. Did you really think you could hide it forever? You have no idea what you're dealing with, he snarled. I've spent years building connections you couldn't imagine. One phone call, and your precious inheritance disappears. Try it. I held up the USB drive. While you're at it, explain these records to the FBI. I'm sure they'd love to hear about your offshore accounts. His hand shot out, grabbing for the drive, but I was ready. I stepped back, watching his desperation grow. What do you want? He demanded. Money? Is that it? Name your price? I laughed, the sound bitter even to my own ears. You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about money, it's about justice. Justice? He spat the word. You're just jealous. You've always been jealous of my success, my marriage, everything I've achieved. Achieved? My voice rose. You mean stolen. From the company, from Alexis, from everyone who trusted you. Alexis? He laughed harshly. My wife knows her place. She won't say a word against me. Ex-wife, I corrected, and she already has. The mask slipped completely then. Brian's face contorted with rage as he lunged forward, but a hand caught his shoulder. Is there a problem here? Camden, my artist friend who owned the cafe, stood behind Brian. His tall frame towered over my brother. Brian shrugged off Camden's hand, straightening his jacket. Family discussion, private. Doesn't look private from where I'm standing, Camden said calmly, and my security cameras caught everything. I saw the calculation in Brian's eyes as he looked between us. This isn't over, little sister. You want to play hardball? Let's play. But remember, you started this war. No, Brian. You started it years ago. I'm just finally fighting back. He turned to leave but paused. Tell Alexis she has 24 hours to come home, or she'll regret it. Threaten her again, I said quietly. And those financial records won't be the only things the FBI receives. He stormed off, nearly knocking over a parking meter in his rage. Camden touched my arm gently. You okay? I realized I was shaking. No, but I will be. My phone buzzed with a text from Zara. Alexis is safe. Got everything on video. You should see this footage. Another message followed immediately. Emerson says Brian just tried to access the main servers. IT blocked him, but he's getting desperate. Thanks for the backup, I told Camden, showing him the messages. Think your security footage might help our case? He grinned. Already sent it to Zara. Your brother really showed his true colors today. I looked in the direction Brian had gone, thinking about the years of manipulation and abuse, about Alexis, hiding her pain behind perfect smiles, about every person he'd stepped on to climb his way up. "Camden," I said, "I need a favor. Can you get me in touch with that investigative reporter friend of yours?" He raised an eyebrow. "The one who specializes in corporate fraud? Sure, but are you ready for that kind of publicity?" I thought about Brian's threats, his smug certainty that he could still control the situation. Yes, it's time everyone saw who my brother really is. My phone buzzed again. Emerson this time. "Emergency board meeting called for tomorrow. Brian's trying to rally support against you." I smiled grimly. "Tell Emerson I'll be there, with evidence." The war was on, and this time I wasn't backing down. The boardroom hummed with tension as I spread the documents across the polished table. Emerson stood at my side, pointing out key figures to the assembled board members. Brian's empty chair glared at me from the opposite end. "As you can see," Emerson explained, "the pattern of fraudulent transactions extends back 18 months. A board member adjusted his glasses. "And you're certain these originated from Mr. Wheeler's department?" "More than certain." I nodded to Zara, who distributed additional folders. Page 3 shows his electronic signatures on every major transfer. The boardroom door burst open. Brian strode in, flanked by 2 men in expensive suits. "Sorry I'm late," he announced, not sounding sorry at all. "I had to collect my legal representation." "This is a closed board meeting," Emerson stated firmly. "A meeting about me, without me?" Brian's laugh was sharp. "My lawyers advised against that." "Your lawyers," I said, standing up, "might want to see this first." I gestured to the screens behind me as Zara started the presentation. Security footage from multiple angles showed Brian's confrontation outside the cafe, his threats clearly audible. One of his lawyers winced. "Illegal surveillance," Brian snapped. "Inadmissible." "Public space," Zara corrected. "Perfectly legal." The boardroom door opened again. Alexis walked in, her head high, followed by 2 people I recognized from the FBI's white-collar crime division. Brian's face went chalk white. "What is this?" "Special Agents Marcus and Rivera," one of them announced, showing his badge. "We'd like to ask you some questions about Artemis Holdings." "I invoke my right to counsel," Brian said quickly. "Interesting response," I noted. "Nobody accused you of anything yet." The board members shifted uncomfortably as the agents approached Brian. His lawyers huddled together, whispered frantically. "Before this goes any further," I said, "I have a proposition." Brian's eyes darted between me and the FBI agents. "I'm listening." "Resignation. Immediate. Full confession. Voluntary repayment of all stolen funds." I met his gaze steadily. "In exchange, the company doesn't press charges." "The FBI might still have questions," Agent Marcus interjected. "They might," I agreed, "but corporate cooperation usually helps in these situations, doesn't it?" Brian's lawyer nodded slightly to him. "And if I refuse?" Brian challenged. Alexis stepped forward, placing a stack of papers on the table. "Then I submit these to the FBI. Every transaction, every hidden account, every conversation where you detailed your plans." Her voice trembled but held firm. "Including the ones where you discussed having me take the fall if you were caught." The second lawyer immediately stood up. "If you'll excuse us, we need to consult with our client." "You have 5 minutes," I said. They hurried Brian into a corner. I could see him gesturing angrily, his face getting redder by the second. Finally, his shoulders slumped. "Fine," he spat, returning to the table. "You win. I'll sign whatever you want." Emerson slid the resignation papers across the table. "Already prepared." As Brian signed, his hand shaking with rage, I felt no triumph, only a deep sadness for what could have been. "The confession next," Agent Rivera said, producing another document. Brian's pen hesitated. "Layla, we're family." "Family." I laughed softly. "Was it family when you told our parents I was worthless? When you sabotaged my first gallery showing? When you planned to frame your own wife for your crimes? I built this company." "No," Alexis cut in. "You stole from it. There's a difference." The next hour passed in a blur of signatures and statements. When it was done, the FBI agents escorted Brian out, his lawyers trailing behind like lost puppies. "The board needs to discuss next steps," Emerson announced, gathering the documents. I nodded, suddenly exhausted. In the hallway, Alexis caught my arm. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. Where will you go now? She smiled, looking lighter than I'd seen her in years. Paris, maybe. Start over. Paint again. You used to love painting. I stopped because Brian said it was childish. She hugged me tightly. Don't let anyone dim your light again, Layla. You're stronger than I ever was. After she left, Zara appeared with coffee and a concerned look. You okay? No, I admitted. But I will be. My phone buzzed. A message from our mother. What have you done to your brother? I showed it to Zara, who rolled her eyes. Want me to handle it? No. I straightened my shoulders. It's time I handled my family myself. Ms. Wheeler, Emerson called from the boardroom. They're ready for you. I took a deep breath, thinking of Uncle Robert. He'd seen something in me that even I hadn't recognized. Strength, determination, integrity. Coming, I called back. It was time to build something new from the ashes of my brother's destruction. Something honest, something real. Time to prove that the little sister with the paint-stained hands could do more than just survive. She could lead. My parents' house looked exactly the same. Pristine lawn, perfect flowers, Brian's old sports trophies still proudly displayed in the front window. I'd been avoiding this confrontation for a week, but after 30 missed calls and countless accusatory texts, I couldn't put it off any longer. Mom opened the door before I could knock. Finally decided to show your face? Hello to you too, Mom. The living room was a shrine to Brian's achievements. Photos, awards, newspaper clippings. My own art degree diploma was nowhere in sight. Dad sat in his usual armchair, looking older than I remembered. Explain yourself, young lady. Explain what? I settled onto the couch. How your perfect son embezzled millions? How he planned to frame his wife? Or how he threatened me in broad daylight? Lies. Mom's voice shook. Your brother would never... I have proof. I pulled out my tablet, playing the security footage. Everything's documented. The FBI has it all. They watched in silence as Brian's threats echoed through the speakers. Mom's hand flew to her mouth when he lunged at me. He was under stress, Dad argued weakly. You provoked him. By existing? Yeah, that's always been enough to provoke Brian, hasn't it? You're just jealous, Mom snapped. You've always been jealous of his success. I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. Success? Let me show you his kind of success. I pulled up the financial records, the offshore accounts, the documented threats against Alexis. With each new piece of evidence, their faces grew paler. He's your brother, Mom whispered. How could you do this to him? How could you do this to me? I stood up, hands shaking. For 30 years, I've watched you worship him while he tore me down. Every achievement ignored, every dream mocked. Did you know he sabotaged my first gallery showing? Paid critics to trash my work? Dad shifted uncomfortably. That's not true. Here's the proof. I showed them the emails we'd found. He couldn't stand the idea that I might succeed on my own merit. But he had such potential, Mom protested. And I didn't? Look at me, Mom. Really look. I'm running a multinational company. My art is in galleries across 3 continents. I did that despite you both, despite Brian, despite everyone who said I couldn't. The doorbell rang. Mom started to rise, but I waved her down. That'll be Alexis. Alexis? Dad frowned. Why would she? Because she's filing for divorce, and she wanted you to hear her side before Brian spins his lies. Alexis entered, looking elegant and composed. The contrast between her confidence now and her former nervous demeanor was striking. Hello, she said quietly. I thought you should know the truth. For the next hour, Alexis detailed years of manipulation, emotional abuse, and financial schemes. She showed them the divorce papers Brian had hidden, the threatening texts he'd sent after I confronted him. He was going to blame me, she finished. Set me up to take the fall for everything. Your perfect son was willing to send his wife to prison to save himself. Mom was crying silently. Dad stared at his hands. The FBI is still investigating, I added. They'll probably want to talk to you both. I wanted you to be prepared. What do we do? Mom asked, her voice small. Stop enabling him. Stop making excuses. For once in your lives, see him for what he really is. My phone buzzed. Emerson. Brian's trying to access company accounts through a back door. IT caught it. Want us to alert the FBI? Yes, I texted back. Then to my parents, he's still at it. Even now he's trying to steal more. Dad finally looked up. I don't understand. We gave him everything. That's the problem, Alexis said gently. You gave him everything, including permission to destroy anyone who got in his way. Including his own sister, I added. His own wife. Mom reached for a photo of Brian, him in his college graduation gown, beaming at the camera. Where did we go wrong? By believing he could do no wrong. I stood up. I have to go. The company needs me. But think about something. All those years you spent promoting Brian's potential, I was actually living up to mine. Alexis followed me out. In the driveway, she squeezed my hand. That was brave. Was it? I feel sick. They needed to hear it, all of it. She smiled sadly. My flight to Paris leaves tomorrow. New life, new start. Send me your art when you start painting again? Only if you promise to display it in one of your galleries. My phone buzzed again. Zara this time. FBI wants to meet. Brian's getting desperate. I hugged Alexis goodbye, watching as she drove away. Through the living room window, I could see my parents holding each other, surrounded by the wreckage of their illusions. Sometimes justice feels like breaking things. Sometimes it feels like finally being able to breathe. I got in my car, ready to face whatever desperate move Brian had planned next. The truth was out now. No more shadows, no more pretending. Time to finish what I started. The emergency board meeting was already in chaos when I arrived. Brian had somehow gotten in before me, and he was standing at the head of the table, wild-eyed and disheveled. There she is, he shouted, the artist who thinks she can run a business. Security moved to remove him, but I held up my hand. Let him speak. I want everyone to hear this. Oh, you want to hear me? Brian's laugh was unhinged. How about we hear about your complete lack of qualifications? Your failed art shows? The fact that you couldn't even sell a painting without Uncle Robert's pity? Are you done? I kept my voice steady, setting my briefcase on the table. Done? I'm just getting started. He pulled out a stack of papers. I have proof that you're unfit to run this company. Proof that Uncle Robert was mentally incompetent when he changed his will. The board members murmured uncomfortably. Emerson stepped forward. Mr. Wheeler, I advised your uncle personally. He was of sound mind. Really? Brian slapped more documents down. Then explain these medical records. I opened my briefcase calmly. You mean the forged medical records you created last night? The ones you paid Dr. Marcus to backdate? His face went white. How did you? Dr. Marcus called me this morning. He's very cooperative when faced with losing his medical license. I nodded to Zara, who started distributing folders. He provided quite detailed information about your attempt to falsify Uncle Robert's medical history. One of the board members gasped as she read the contents. Mr. Wheeler, this is criminal. It's lies, Brian snarled. All lies. Just like her paintings, worthless imitations of real art. Speaking of art, I pressed a button on my phone, and the boardroom screens lit up. Let's talk about the real reason Uncle Robert left me the company. Security footage appeared, showing Brian in one of our storage facilities, replacing original artworks with forgeries. 3 months ago, I explained, Uncle Robert discovered that Brian had been selling authentic pieces and replacing them with high-quality fakes. The profits went straight to his offshore accounts. You can't prove that was me, Brian said quickly. Actually, we can. Agent Marcus entered the room, followed by his FBI team. We found your forgery supplier. He's been very informative. Brian lunged for the door, but security blocked his path. This is a setup. She's framing me. Like you planned to frame Alexis? I asked quietly. The boardroom door opened again. Alexis walked in, carrying a laptop. I think the board should hear this. She played an audio recording. Brian's voice, crystal clear. If anything goes wrong, all evidence points to my wife. She signed everything. She'll take the fall. That's inadmissible, Brian shouted. She recorded me illegally. Wrong again, Agent Marcus said. She was already cooperating with our investigation. The recording was authorized by court order. Brian's lawyers, hovering nervously by the door, began gathering their things. Wait, Brian called to them. You can't leave. I'm paying you to... Your accounts are frozen, I interrupted. All of them, including the hidden ones in the Cayman Islands. He slumped into a chair, the fight draining from him. You've ruined everything. No, Brian, you did that yourself. I turned to the board. Ladies and gentlemen, I move to formally remove Brian Wheeler from any position within this company and its subsidiaries. Seconded, Emerson said firmly. The vote was unanimous. As the FBI led Brian away in handcuffs, he tried one last time. Mom and Dad will never forgive you for this. Actually, said a quiet voice from the doorway, we're here to support your sister. Our parents stood there, looking small and tired. Mom's eyes were red from crying, but her spine was straight as she watched her golden child being led away. How could you? Brian called to them. Dad shook his head sadly. We've been asking ourselves the same question for days. How could you, Brian? After Brian was gone, the board quickly approved my restructuring plan. As people filed out, Mom approached my chair. We were wrong, she whispered, about everything, about you. Yes, I said simply. You were. Can you ever forgive us? I looked at her, then at Dad, seeing for the first time how age and regret had marked them. I don't know, but I'm willing to try if you are. Alexis touched my shoulder. My car's waiting. Paris awaits. I hugged her tightly. Send me your first painting. I will. And Layla? She smiled through tears. Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. After everyone left, I stood at the boardroom window, watching the city lights come on. Zara appeared with coffee. Quite a day, boss. Quite a month. I took the coffee gratefully. Did we do the right thing? You gave him chances. Multiple chances. He chose this ending. My phone buzzed. A message from Camden. Gallery opening next week. Still want that wall space for your new collection? I smiled, thinking of the paintings I'd been working on in secret. Paintings about power, truth, and redemption. Yes, I texted back. It's time to show the world what I can really do. The gallery hummed with conversation as people moved from piece to piece. My new collection, Shadows and Light, filled the walls, paintings that told the story of power, betrayal, and redemption without a single recognizable face. They're beautiful, Camden said, appearing at my elbow with champagne. Especially that one. He nodded toward the centerpiece, a massive canvas showing broken chains transforming into butterflies, the piece I'd finished the night after Brian's arrest. Ms. Wheeler? A young woman approached, notepad in hand. I'm from Art Forum. Would you comment on the inspiration behind your work? Before I could answer, my parents walked in. Mom wore a simple black dress, no designer labels, no flashy jewelry. Dad looked uncertain in his rented tuxedo. Excuse me, I told the reporter. Family matter. They stood before the centerpiece, studying it intently. Mom's hand trembled as she reached out, almost touching the surface. This is what it felt like, isn't it? She asked softly. All those years under his shadow. Part of it. I sipped my champagne. The butterflies are new. Layla, Zara called from across the room. The buyers from Paris are here. I turned to my parents. Duty calls. Wait, Dad caught my arm gently. We've been going through old boxes. Found something you should have. He pulled out a carefully wrapped package. Inside was a small, childish painting, bright colors and wobbly lines. Your first artwork, Mom explained. The one Brian told us he'd thrown away. He'd hidden it in his old room. I remembered that painting. Age 7, proudly showing it to my family. Brian had called it garbage. We should have seen it then, Dad said. How he tried to dim your light. We're so sorry, sweetheart. The Paris buyers approached before I could respond. As I discussed prices and shipping arrangements, I watched my parents move through the gallery, really seeing my work for the first time. Quite a turnout, Emerson observed, joining me after the buyers left. The company's art division reports record profits this quarter. Any word from our former executive? Brian took a plea deal, 5 to 7 years, full restitution. He paused. He tried to have his lawyers contact you. 4? A documentary crew wants to tell his side of the story. He needs your permission, given the company's involvement. I laughed softly, still trying to control the narrative. What should I tell them? Tell them the truth belongs to everyone now. He doesn't get to own it anymore. My phone buzzed. A message from Alexis with a photo attached. Her first painting in years, bright and bold against her Paris apartment wall. Speaking of truth, Zara appeared with a tablet. You should see these reviews coming in. The critics who had once dismissed my work as derivative were now praising its raw emotional honesty and fearless exploration of power dynamics. Success is the best revenge, Zara grinned. No, I corrected her. Truth is. Camden clinked his glass for attention. Ladies and gentlemen, the artist would like to say a few words. I hadn't planned to speak, but looking around at the gathered faces, friends, family, colleagues who had become allies, I knew what needed to be said. When I was young, someone very important to me said my art was worthless. I believed him for a long time. But art, like truth, has a way of breaking free. I gestured to the paintings. These pieces aren't about revenge or justice. They're about transformation, about breaking chains we didn't know we wore. My parents moved closer, Mom wiping tears. Someone else once told me that power isn't about control. It's about creation, about building something meaningful from the ashes of what tried to destroy you. I raised my glass. To Uncle Robert, who saw strength where others saw weakness, and to everyone who's ever felt shadowed, your light matters. After the speeches and sales, after the critics and collectors left, I found myself alone in the gallery. The centerpiece seemed to glow in the dim light, those broken chains catching the shadows just right. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from an unknown number. Congratulations. You won. Hope you're happy. B. I didn't respond. Instead, I took a photo of the centerpiece and sent it to Alexis with the caption, "We both broke free." Her reply came instantly. No more shadows, only light ahead. I touched the small childhood painting my parents had returned, now hanging in a quiet corner. The colors were still bright, the joy still visible in every messy brushstroke. That little girl had been right all along. Art wasn't about perfection or power or praise. It was about truth, about light, about breaking free. And finally, after all these years, I was flying.